data where we're meeting with partners and talking to the networks, and they're really talking about their programming and who they are. And then the next breath, we'll let the data tell you where to put it.
In May of 2020. It's kind of a silly conversation, to be honest.
Well, if you think about it from having it both ways, and bear with me for a second. If you look at the last 5 years and you add up for the top cable networks and the top broadcasters, and you add up the rate of change that they've gotten each of those 5 years, and you add it together, roughly going to be a 38. So, and that's not compounding, year to year, but it's a 38% increase in rates.
Over how many years?
Over a 5-year period. Okay? Now, it's going to differ from each one of us and each client and each day part and all that good stuff. But let's just use 38. For that same set of networks, over that same 5-year period, the audience drop on adults 18 to 49 was 39%. So that's having it both ways. That's one. But then two, what we all up here get hit with is, C-Flight, C7, OpenAP, Jazz Pods, Prime Pods. All of these things are designed to increase their yield and not address the problem that marketers are facing with this, dynamic of increased costs because of shrinking supply. Now, you can get into all the reasons why, from a supply and demand standpoint, that makes sense. And, yes, I understand that. But there, the one of the words that in the intro was transformation. Maybe this is the year to transform and discontinue that and stop having marketers pave the way and pay the load for what, in a lot of ways, is an archaic marketplace.
No, I was going to say, if you take that 38 and 37 number and extend it back even further, we've looked at it back to like 2001, the number is actually even worse. It's like 78% ratings are down in prime time, and prime time up like 180%, something like that. So it's a model that's completely broken, and I totally agree with you. Like, I don't... If we come back and everybody walks to the table this year with the same amount of money in network television, like, shame on us, because it's just playing right into the hands. And we were talking about a network that I won't name. Their average delivery at our agency was like under 60%, and I know that in 2 months we're going to be sitting at the table and people are going to be begging them to take money. Right. Like, that is a failure. Like, they failed us, and we're going to beg them to take our money.
Did you take cash? Did you get cash back, or just take goods?
No, yeah, they love giving cash back. That's
that's true.
Popular
right,
conversation.
Yeah, that's true. I know that.
There's a guy in the back handing it out right now.
Okay,
if you're interested.
Let's go.
Just like P&G's rates.
We break news here, MediaPost. Right, yeah.
Sign that.
Trying to fix it.
So yeah, I think that if we, then you call a network and say, hey, our budget's down 12% this year, and they look at you like, how can your budget be down? Well, your ratings are down. Like, why are you yelling at me about this? It makes no sense, and it's broken, and we need to fix it, and we need to challenge ourselves and be demanding of ourselves and teach our clients and push. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep getting pushed over.
I keep pushing the zero-based budget allocation every year, rather than just take what we had a year ago and see if we can get back to year-ago budgets. And I understand that that's what the sellers, in many cases, being evaluated on, and whether they want to do a good deal with somebody whose money is down is difficult to get done. But it's ridiculous. If your ratings were the same, that'd be a different story. Or when you have a big show, or when you increase your ratings across the board, those few examples, then you come and you say, I got to get a price adjustment. Right. Wait a second. So your prices go up when your shows fail, and your prices go up when your shows do well. Who's flipping the bill here?
Right. Yeah, in the networks, all the networks are talking about this idea of business outcomes, right? Right. And which is just kind of comical on many levels, but it's kind of only one business outcome we want from the networks is just increase supply, right? If you're so good at what you do, you have so much data at your fingertips, why is it so hard to actually increase your ratings just a little bit?
They would say all those OTT platforms are going to increase.
Yeah, but I think one of the things we're missing in this discussion is sort of the evolution of sort of measurement and research, and that as you look at the landscape, and that the transition from linear to digital, whether it's set-top box, whether it's over the top, whether it is online streaming, et cetera, that measurement hasn't lived up to sort of the traditional measurements that we've all been dealt with from a Nielsen standpoint. And it really is important to then transition and get that, because even basic how do you get to multi-touch attribution, then deal with outcomes to look at increased supply. But I think one of the things that's missing in that as well is that for all the platforms that content is being streamed on, it's at a different economic model than linear television. And so, a 15 is the same cost as a 30, yet a 60 is more expensive. Yet in linear TV, a 60 is more expensive and a 15 is half the cost of a 30. Like, if you want more money and more attribution and more rating points going or dollars going against those platforms, it needs to be at the same economic model as linear television in order to then tap into that kind of funds.
Last year, your agency, a few others, were involved with NBC to start up C-Flight, something John talked about. And I just wondered whether your clients took that and, what prospects do you see? Obviously, this year, we wrote a story about Viacom also saying they're going to do C-Flight. Actually they said, Sean Moran said, well, it's a good name. I love that name. We'll do it. Anyway, so, but, to their point, to a salesperson point, well, we want industry to come around certain things to be together to make it easier for marketers. Okay, at that point, whether we talk about premium pricing, we'll leave that aside for the moment. Anyway, how do you think that's worked over the last year for DC, the C-Flight thing with your clients?
Well, they're a Group M client, so I'll take the bullet.
Okay.
Thanks. I think that, in execution, there are lots of challenges. And that, when you think about it at a grand scale, okay, great, I have a $10 million budget. I'm going to then put, 15, 20% against C-Flight on a digital campaign. Great, fine, makes a lot of sense. The actuality of that is a lot more challenging and a lot more labor intensive, because it's not, for those clients that are multi-brands, we'll pick on P&G again, when your P&G and your $10 million budget is made up of 5 different brands and 10 different sub-brands and everything else, you're now looking at, $1.5 million broken down into, $15,000, $25,000 IO. That is really labor intensive for both the network and the agency, and that was not something that was anticipated as part of this overall process. And so that created a lot of flaws in the mechanics of it. You also then run into a measurement issue, because what you're looking at in terms of changing the way digital is purchased for that thing is that they're billing on estimate versus billing on actual. So where digital is always based on performance, we're now changing that metric, which then creates a whole slew of other challenges in terms of the execution of it.
Anyone has any views about that, or not really? Nope. Okay, good. We'll move on from that. A lot has been made last year about doing more data-driven deals, and business outcome deals. Last year, A&E then announced that they're going to make these guarantees, primary guarantees, on media deals when it comes to business outcomes, either website visits, in-store traffic, or maybe even sales. A lot of people feel this is, when Jason's already mentioned it, kind of fantasy. But I'm just wondering what prospects are there that your clients kind of might demand some of these deals, business outcome guarantees, for this upfront.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, guys. So I think that if you're making a large investment in a singular property, you should expect a business outcome deal. Now, if you're sponsoring a specific program with a specific goal in mind, and that's the important part, is you kind of need to know what the expectation is on both sides before you get into a business outcome deal, because I was on a flight this morning, and I was flying Delta, and everything, we left right on time, we landed on time, we spent 30 minutes trying to get to the gate. So, end of the day, no matter what ad I saw, no matter what happened on A&E or any other network, my experience with Delta let me one thing. So the next time I book a flight, no matter how many ads I saw, I'm going to fly American. So it's really just very hard to sit there and say a business outcome is guaranteed because you're running 30-second ads on a television show. I just, it's we all have ROIs and ROASs, and very rarely can you actually manage across a single network.
So things are out of their control sometimes.
And if you last 4 feet is out of their control.
Right. So things are out of your control. And you do a business outcome deal. How do you get to the attribution that this one specific network did this? There's many other factors in the chain of what can go right or wrong, right?
Yeah. I think there's two sides to it. I think that the attribution piece of it and business outcomes, one of the things that we found is we need to do a lot of work in that space. And the first thing we found is, well, every client's doing it slightly different, using a different partner. There's no kind of, again, one, this is how you do attribution. And we actually ran the same campaign across 3 different partners and got 3 different outcomes.
Right. We just did the same thing.
So it's like, okay, so there's on that side of it. On the other side, I think that it can be easy to come up with a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do these things. But I do think that as we think about currency and changing the currency and saying, let's focus more on business outcomes, let's focus more on performance like digital does, like it doesn't need to be just about a CPM, because the CPM is what's killing us, the inflation and the constant need to have a lower cost. But if we can say, I can think of ways that can potentially drive your business forward, I think that's a path that we absolutely need to go down. So we've got to sort out how to do the measurement, and it takes a lot of hard work, and you've got to spend time with clients, and it includes lots of people who aren't even sitting in this room. I think that's the other big piece of this, right? Like media buying isn't a media buyer and a media seller anymore. There's so many people that need to be involved in that process. So it includes clients,
procurement
partners.
Procurement people?
Love procurement people.
You do? Wow.
Sure,
Good.
let's
Tell
not.
us.
But to Mike's point, I think this goes back to the beginning and talking about open AP. You need commonality in order to evaluate the business outcome, because if network A has a different data set than network B, than network C, and they're all tracking it slightly differently, we're using Foursquare, we're using Placed, we're doing something else. Like, unless it's all the same, how do you then attribute it? And then, oh, by the way, instead of reaching 3 people, I could be reaching the same person 3 times. And that could then be the outcome. And so it becomes really important to have commonality, and that's why a lot of this is done on the back end at the agencies instead of on the front end with suppliers.
John, any thoughts? No. A few.
Yeah. Given the fact that there's so many different variables, it's really, really difficult to do that, and everyone's just talked about that. But at the end of the day, just look at how agencies have to do their compensation with our clients. We've got to put skin in the game. And maybe it's not outcome-based, but it's some type, to Gibbs' point on measurement, it's difficult to really hone in on how we measure it, but there has to be some kind of effort to put skin in the game on both sides.
John, I'm just glad one of us up here is getting compensated from clients.
At least that's the idea, right? So,
just at that point, there is a direct response model that actually looks a little bit like business outcomes, and the way that model works is a constant optimization of media. It's not a 1% model where you buy it and you set it and you manage it on a weekly basis. And the DR model is managed on an hourly basis sometimes. And if clients want that kind of outcomes, they're going to have to pay a higher fee, because the manpower associated with the data that's going to be required to pull this off is not as simple as they want it to be.
Okay. I want to open it up to questions. I know it's a little bit early, but I'm sure there's a few sellers out there that have some questions for our panel buyers here. And if you can't think of anything, but Joe Mandisi has a question. So,
everyone else, please say your name and company before your question. Thank you.
Yes.
So it's very enlightening. So I heard a couple of things. I think it's great that you talk about outcome-based deals. But I also heard you still talking about that you're buying for premium, you're buying programs as a proxy for that, and that what you really want in the marketplace is ratings. There's no scarcity of audience in the marketplace. There's plenty of people watching TV. What's happening has become fragmented. And I think what I find interesting about OpenAP 2.0, at least from Wayne's coverage, and this concept that they really want to build a premium marketplace, is this concept of audience buying, right? And I think the most innovative approach I've seen so far was what Walt Horseman did at Audience Express. You know, this concept that if you re-aggregate the inventory, even of piecemeal networks, you can still deliver meaningful shares of audience. I think going back to Turner's Media at the Millennium, we all know this. It's about dispersion, right, and building audiences. So my question for you is, shouldn't we be talking about audience as the premium and not programs and ratings?
You could, but you also have to talk about scale.
Yeah, but if you scale, Media at the Millennium proved that if you aggregate fragmented media reach, you build some meaningful, unduplicated reach.
I think the NFL proves that if you buy highly rated programs, you move stuff really fast.
And you pay for it.
Right, and it's worth paying for.
Cinema as well. Yeah. I mean, cinema is, what the coverage for, Avengers Endgame has been, basically everywhere this last week or the last couple of weeks. And so there is still premium content that can then aggregate it. I think, in terms of aggregating audiences that's still out there, I think the question is, is it 100% premium and is it 100%, important or, scalable across the board? Because the reality is, if somebody is choosing to watch that content, clearly they have engaged in that in some way, shape, or form, and you can make the argument that that is actually premium. The difference is, what is the cost of that premium, and what is that value proposition?
Any questions, by the way, out there? Okay, here we are, and right over here. Good. Two. We're going to start over there.
David McLean from Tularia. Good morning. So when you're talking about NFL and certain properties, I think there's a level of importance, and they're so unique in the sense that buying into those franchises, there is interest from an audience, and so it's easier, clearly, to reach a lot of people at a lot of time. But what about the other programming that's out there and reaching people in other niche areas? I mean, that's kind of the reality. There aren't many NFLs. There aren't many certain game shows or any kind of award shows that really garner the kind of attention that an NFL or something unique, a property like that can attract. So it's where is everybody else and how to reach those people. And so the fragmentation, I think, is important. So the question is, how do we then reach people in these other fragmented markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way that we can keep it up is a good example of there's still, I don't think any of us are going to say we shouldn't buy television, we shouldn't go and transact some of the way that we have in the past, and there's a lot of value in that. And I think getting to understand that it may be a premium to get there, but it's going to get you this high value, high reach audience at scale, and there's a lot of value in that. To that fragmented audience, that's who we have to go. We need to figure out where they are and how you get to them, because we're seeing so much frequency against heavy TV users, and what we really need to do is pull back on that frequency and push that money down into the funnel further and find whether it be the most valuable consumer, that next reach point. You can't just keep buying more and more television and expecting to get reach, because there are people you just will never reach. So I think you have to be open to being, finding them on other platforms, thinking about what that content looks like, and make sure you're kind of engaging with them in the right places.
If you look at a reach curve, and you do one reach curve on, let's say 0 to 50, low viewers, moving the ladder, the high reach curve is like, right? And if you're looking at lower viewership, it never actually goes anywhere. So television is very, very good at reaching a very specific audience. It is not very good at reaching, younger audiences. Not very good at reaching, just lots and lots of folks because they're and even if we reach them, we're not reaching them effectively because of things like C5 because just that a pattern.
We had another question down in front over here. Okay, sorry.
Chris Bizzaro from Canoe. There's many on-demand platforms in the living room now, so connected TVs, OTT, cable VOD. Right now, they're attributed a one-to-one, right, as if a single person's watching. Since they're in the living room, speaking to supply in the marketplace, does adding co-viewing to those platforms help the supply issue?
The question isn't about whether there's co-viewing or not. The question is about whether the calculation for co-viewing is accurate. So Hulu's including co-viewing, Roku's including co-viewing. What you really need to do is calculate what it is and where that goes. I think that, adding that, the co-viewing factor that Hulu and Roku are using, I believe, is like 1.2. I don't know that should be done every, I'm pretty sure not every program that is watched on a demand basis has a co-viewing factor with it. Some are higher, some are lower, but, they're just adding it up across the board. And so it's being evaluated, in terms of what it is. In terms of the overall measurement, does it make sense? Does it keep going on? We'll continue to look at it and evaluate and see whether we want to include it or not. But it does help overall. Just not sure it's right.
Right here in front.
How's it going? I'm Evan Cavanaugh from Simplify. You guys mentioned that you're already doing on the back end what OAP and what OAR are probably doing for the networks to try and standardize a unit of measurement for OTT and streaming marketplace. Do you think the industry would benefit from the agencies getting together to try and create a standard unit of measurement, therefore, taking away the network's ability to maximize their yield management, but still create some type of standardization in the marketplace?
First off, thanks for the lanyards.
You're welcome. Yes, I am the lanyard guy.
Now over to Jason.
No, I didn't get a lanyard, so you're not gonna like my answer probably.
Because you were late.
Yeah, I was late.
He was on a plane, Delta.
Yes. So I'm rewinding the question in my head now because I got stuck in the lanyards.
So I was just asking if the industry would benefit from the agencies rather than.
I would say that every agency has their secret sauce, just like every client has a secret sauce, and I would like to have theirs. But all kidding aside, at the end of the day, what the data and the analytics and all the work that we put into it is our work, and that's what we sell to our clients, not to the industry.
So do you think maybe a third party, something like Nielsen, for how many flaws they have, would work still?
I think there's, the challenge is that, from an agency holding company, there are 10 of us in sort of aggregate, give or take. From a vendor standpoint, there are a lot more who spend a lot more money than we do on certain things like that, and so there's a better opportunity to force that. What we spend on Nielsen is a fraction of what the networks spend on Nielsen, and so they have better pull and better influence in that arena, so it would be beneficial to sort of get to that point from our point of view.
Any other questions out there at the moment? So, John, let's talk about what the networks try to do in conjunction with everything else they're doing when it comes to cutting back inventory. And you had some specific views about, how networks see themselves maximizing the fewer, less inventory or smaller pods. Go ahead and take a whack at it.
Well, I think it's really simple. I mean, we heard promises last year that we were going to see a reduction in commercialization.
Like 10% or so, in theory.
And the fact of the matter is, with that particular network, who is now my client, I would prefer not to mention who that is.
Enjoy.
But,
they're great.
Their commercialization actually went up by 2%.
I also would like to add that from that standpoint, it's really funny because there are a lot of networks who are saying we're going to reduce commercialization, yet we're not going to reduce, because it impacts clutter, yet they're not reducing the number of promos in any of their programming. So it's like their commercialization is important. Our commercialization is unimportant. And so it's, again, having their cake and eating it too.
You're absolutely right. And then, so you take one pod and you limit it to 60 seconds, and you take the commercials out of that first pod and you just put them in the next pod. You charge a premium for the first pod, but you don't discount the second pod. So it's
robbery. It's actually, they lied to us. And for people who know me, I'm a pretty casual guy. I dropped F-bombs in that meeting because it is ridiculous. I firmly believe that they lied to us. And they sold us on a proposition. Sorry, I'm really
a seller.
But they sold us on a proposition that wasn't true.
A seller lied.
You paid more for something that you thought was going to happen. You paid more for something that they told you was going to happen, and none of it happened.
Jason.
I can't really cover on that. So
yeah,
I can't beat that. But one of my favorite things to do is that is Viacom a sponsor on this thing? All right.
Not this year.
So, all right. So you know what I'm going to say is I used to send, when Lucas was in charge, I used to take out my my Apple stopwatch, and I would literally do a countdown clock on the commercial length, and then I would send a note and say I've just lost 8 minutes of my life. I mean,
half the pod?
Right.
That was half the pod.
No, that was a full pod. Let's be fair. I mean, you have to be fair to these guys. At the end of the day, the reality is that a commercial that's if you go A through Z and you're a commercial K, there's really not a hell of a lot of value there. So we can debate that all day. I mean, taking out commercials decreases supply, but having supply that's valueless doesn't necessarily sell product either.
Question over here.
Yeah, I have a question. Jane Clark from SIM. We're seeing a lot of these new sell-side platforms then coming up. So you've got Xandr, you've got Comcast Freewheel, you've got NCC. So I'm just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, do you want one TV platform where you're able to go like Google and Facebook and TV could compete, or do you think it's going to be a fragmented, environment where you might have 2 or 3 or 4? How will you deal with that?
I mean, I think that they're, particularly when you look at, NCC and Freewheel and Cadent, for example, they're all aggregating, A4, throw that in there, they're all aggregating inventory across the board. And so there is a inventory waterfall in terms of where the prioritization comes in, who's getting access to what. I think, from our perspective, we're looking at, where's their value. And if I can aggregate, 50 networks that are delivering and get a national number that's actually less expensive than, buying something else, might work for some clients, might work for other clients. Doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but again, it's about aggregating impressions for an audience. I think it's not going to be, those platforms are never going to be 100% of a buy for the most part, but they will be a portion of it, and there is a place for it. If there wasn't a place for it, there'd be no demand.
Any other questions, especially from the sell side out there? Any of those big network groups? Viacom? No? Maybe later. Okay, we'll think about it. Okay. So for this up front, where do you see sort of the digital media players working themselves in? Obviously, they don't have the scale. Obviously, not the scale that your marketers need. But where, if anything, do they inroads? Either, maybe with network-owned things or separate, independent, premium digital video platforms.
So we're gonna. So you talk about meetings where salespeople lie to you. I was with Facebook.
Oh.
And I don't think I have to say any more. Are they here? I just got to keep checking the board.
No, don't worry about it.
Right?
They're busy.
They're busy.
They're busy doing other
they're
things.
They're on Capitol Hill today. They came back with a stat that was so impressive, right? It was they have 100 million uniques a month that watch Facebook InStream or Facebook Reserve or watch 1 minute a month. And they're walking out with this data. It's like, oh my God, look at this. Look how great we are. We have 1 minute a month. And I'm thinking to myself, you have like 1,000 minutes a day from people. And all they're giving you is a minute a month of video. So,
But that's 60 different videos because they're all less than a second.
Right. That's yes. Yeah. I actually asked that question. I said, is that a composite minute or a total minute? And the fun thing about being in a walled garden is they don't have to tell you anything. So until those guys, and they definitely have tremendous amount of views. There's no question about that. They need to let us understand their data. They need to let us understand the mechanics of how they're getting to their number. And there will be a ton of money that will flow that way from television. But until we fundamentally understand what's true and what's not true, it's really hard to sell a client on whimsy. And the other fun fact...
It's also hard to sell them off Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other aspect of it. The reality is everybody wants to be on Facebook no matter what happens with Facebook. Mm-hmm. It's a little different than Google. Like we've had a lot of clients that have pulled back of Google. Or at least pulled back from Google, but still buying the platform through other means and other services. But trying to get a client to move on of those platforms is pushing a rock up a hill.
Last couple of years, I guess people have talked about Google Preferred. I guess those 10%, the high performing areas of YouTube. How have they been doing? I mean, is that something you still pursue? Is that something that's valuable? John, you have it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's part of the mix, and the fact of the matter is, it's from an efficiency standpoint, it's better than a lot of other alternatives. And if you're truly getting what they're selling, there's a place for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would say particularly against younger demos, what we have seen from a audience standpoint is 18 to 24, 18 to 34-year-olds are really not watching linear television the way they used to. And if you're targeting them, it's far more efficient to go to, YouTube, Google Preferred, et cetera, from a content standpoint to get it. I mean, I think, from an industry standpoint, that's a real problem for us, and that we're creating viewership patterns amongst teenagers to avoid, living room television altogether. And, as an industry, if we're going to succeed, we need to change that behavior.
13-year-old girls who, watch first-class travel videos. Right. So bring it back there. Questions out there still? Anything? Sure, nothing? Okay. A lot has been made about OTT. A year ago, actually, I remember speaking to Lyle Schwartz about this, and, he was saying things aren't perfect when it comes to measurement stuff. Yet, that seems to be a lot of emphasis for a lot of legacy media companies in going forward, especially NBC with their platform. That's pretty much advertising driven. They kind of equate it to what broadcasting started to be. Where do you see, if anything, those kind of platforms factoring into the upfront this year, either via separate companies or what the legacy media companies are doing? Is that going to be an important area for you to pursue?
At the end of the day, I looked at our billings, and is it meaningful? No. Is it important? Yes, because the OTT landscape, 3 years from now is going to be dramatically different than it is today. So clients need to get ready and start to understand what the value of OTT is, and how to invest in it, and how to manage it, and how to evaluate it. But is it going to I'm going to go from 98 to 50-50? No, that's not plausible.
Brand safety, because let's just bring back the brand safety issue, since we're all you're talking about Facebook. Some people say that even traditional television doesn't really can have brand safety issues. Gibbs, I think you and I were talking beforehand about when it comes to being surprised at things and having to pull not pull advertising or whatever. How do you view that in terms of the environment these days?
I mean, I think brand safety continues to be a priority for all of our clients. There are different levels of consideration, different levels of content. I think if you look at the studio business, it's really sort of easy. You can have Paramount releasing, A Quiet Place, and that has a very different set of priorities versus Dora the Explorer live action coming out, which has a very different set of priorities. So even within the same company, within the same brands, you can have different versions of what is brand safe. But I think it's up to each client to actually understand that and recognize what their options are and how they want to go about doing that. But again, it's important because we are representing brands to the consumer, and everything, how that brand interacts with the consumer is then going to leave a mark on that. So, as Jason was saying, Delta didn't even do anything, A&E didn't even do anything, but now all of a sudden it has a perception issue because of what happened on the plane today. And that's the thing what makes brand safety that much more important, because we are constantly making impressions on our consumers, and we want to make sure that is a positive experience versus a negative experience.
Okay. And just one other tag along. Sorry, John. The other issue with brand safety is also your own employees. So clients who have large franchisee bases, clients who have many employees, and they look at where they advertise, sometimes consumer facing, but also as well as where does this ad land for me on an internal perspective. And the one place in linear television that I can think of over the last year or two where we've run into brands, let's go in air quotes, brand safety issues is on the news networks. And you can define the news networks any way you'd like, but at some point, clients are looking at the news network saying, is this someplace that I can safely be anymore?
So, I look at brand safety. It's obviously very, very important to all of our clients. But if you take it a step further, if you look at the news, and I was just going to bring that up, you look at the news, you're not going to be surprised that your ad is going to run next to a controversial topic or blood and guts and whatever it might be. You have that expectation that could happen. If you're watching a drama that is typically got some tough content, you're making a decision based on what they normally run in that show, and you're making a decision that's acceptable. The issues that we have seen in brand safety is you're running in a place where you assume that the environment is X, and it really comes out to be Y. And you are caught off guard with that, and based on what you ran next to, you would have never made that decision to include that. Right. And I think that's got to be taken into account from a brand safety standpoint. I mean, there's certain shows that I watch on actually broadcast television. I'm one of the people that's my age, but they're tough. I wouldn't put some of my clients in there. And I choose to watch that content.
Oh, come on, the voice isn't that bad.
Yes, it is. So I think we've got to weigh this, the client's acceptance level, and understand that the consumer is opting into those shows versus something being, them being exposed to something that they had no idea was going to happen. And
it might be okay for those viewers. It might be okay, even though we might look at the content and say, "Oh my God, we got to be careful here."
But if you opted in for it, but if all of a sudden you're running next to an ISIS ad or a piece of content that obviously nobody decided that was what they wanted to watch.
Right. Okay, let's get down to business. Where is the market? What do you think? What's your best guess? Or any guess? Because I know it's kind of tough sometimes. Budgets, your clients probably aren't telling you much right now. You still probably are waiting a little bit, or have a hint anyway. Where do you see the marketplace? And in that regard also, pegged to the quarter stuff, where's that market? Gibbs. Yeah.
I think that we've seen the challenge with audience erosion and contraction is really driving a lot of the marketplace. I think that will continue. I think the upfront, that will impact the upfront, and that we all look at it and say, okay, great. Here's what's happening. We have clients that are using market mix modeling, multi-touch attribution, et cetera. Television still works. I think we're getting to a precarious point where television is becoming less and less effective each year, and that makes it really hard because I think we are getting to a tipping point where there's only so much inflation that clients are willing to take. We had a call with a client on Friday, and they're basically like, in the last 3 years, to John's point, or 5 years, where costs have gone up 38%, none of my other commodity costs have gone up anywhere near that, and that's creating a real tipping point in terms of how they're looking at the video landscape and where they're looking to place their dollars.
Jason.
So I think Gibbs pretty much nailed it. We're driving advertisers away from television. We're driving viewers away from television at the same time because for different reasons. So we're all looking for alternatives first. John talked about zero basing budgets. We are doing that very aggressively to zero base budgets, and I think some networks will be surprised that some of the budgets they expect will be significantly less than they had been the years prior.
Yeah, I think the simple supply and demand of it dictates the things we've been seeing over and over again. The challenge to us and to our clients and what we need to work at is diversifying that mix and making sure that we're thinking of ways to extend reach and not just be held to the definition of success is a lower CPM. The definition of success is I didn't pay inflation. Those to me are kind of legacy inertia that hurts us quite a bit. And I think John mentioned it before, this idea of year over year, that just because you had 3 Modern Families last year doesn't mean you need 3 Modern Families this year. It's actually not the same thing. You're just increasing frequency against the same people. So you have to, I think our challenge is to diversify the mix to help manage inflation overall.
Yes to everything.
Okay.
But I also think that we have to go back and obviously dating myself, but the biggest reason that the Upfront exists was that marketers could get a hold of the inventory that they wanted before it disappeared. There's not a lot of that out there right now that we absolutely have to have this. And I would personally like to see more of us we don't have to do the entire Upfront. We don't have to make all of our decisions during this ridiculously small window. For the properties that are not going to sell out, that they are going to be available, why don't we wait until we can actually have a better gauge on what we're doing? And if it's not available from X network, we'll move over to Y. Because then, at the end of the day, as Joe asked the question, why aren't we talking about audiences? With a lot of the television that we're buying, we're looking at it strictly as audience, and we're not looking at it as a particular show or premium content like it used to be. Must-see Thursday night or whatever it used to be called. It doesn't exist. So why should we be buying it all now? Give our clients the flexibility and buy what we think is going to disappear and lock in a good price.
Quickly around the horn, what are you watching right now on broadcast TV? Gibbs.
New Amsterdam.
Jason.
SEAL team.
Any show.
Man.
Quick. Wow. See, sorry about that.
I'm actually watching Downton Abbey. Sorry.
All right. Oh, that's okay. I was going to say I'd support another. You could say Game of Thrones or something.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
You threw it when you said broadcast network. But
Yes.
Oh, well, you could say anything.
No. SEAL Team and Amsterdam are both very, very good shows that I watch, but billions.
Billions. There you go. Okay. No other questions out there? One more from the guy from Viacom. We want to take? Okay, go right ahead.
So our perspective runs around one word, which is meaningful. And if you're going to do an integration that could be moved around from one client to another client to a third client, that's not a meaningful integration. You know, we try to craft them from, from client experience all over experience, and those we'll invest in. Off-the-shelf things that the networks have, if they're free, great. If there's an incremental cost, and they're not driving sales, then thank you very much, but we'll move forward.
Okay, I think we're done. Give these guys a nice hand. And now I want to throw it to Seth Oilman, MediaPost.
Thanks a lot,
can
guys.
help you out with the next segment.
That was great. All right,
Okay.
we're gonna have a networking break in about 10 minutes. I know you guys out here want to talk. A lot of talkers out here. But before we do, a really quick message from Premion. And coming to the stage right now is Jim Wilson, president of Premion. So everybody, please stay in your seats for 10 minutes. Really quick message.
A really quick message. We're going to start off with the video, I think.
Guys, please.
So good morning. Thanks for giving me about 10 minutes to talk. I feel like I should have sponsored the snack station or breakfast for you. I think the best way to people is through their stomachs. But I just realized this morning when I got here that today is actually my 3-year anniversary at Tegna. So 3 years ago today, I started Tegna as the president of nothing. I had an idea about building out an OTT network, and I pitched it to Tegna, and 3 years ago I was the first employee. And 3 years later, we've run tens of thousands of campaigns, have thousands of clients. We have clients that range from big national agencies, obviously some of you in the room, big national brands, but all the way down to auto dealers in Sacramento and hospitals in Austin. And so, we've really been focused at Premion at building, a leading regional and local data services platform. So this is one of my favorite slides these days. I remember when I first started doing this 3 years ago, I used to go to this slide all the time, and it was flip-flopped, and I was saying, streaming TV is catching up to cable TV. Isn't that great? You should pay attention to it. And today, I don't know about if I probably asked you guys to raise your hand and how many of you watch streaming TV. At least 7% of you will raise your hands, so I won't waste that exercise because I think we're all watching streaming TV. Although I am absolutely obsessed with Game of Thrones and have been reading every fan theory for Sunday. But it's really interesting in what's happening, right? The business that we're in at Premion is not about cord cutters, although cord cutters are driving a large part of it. Cord cutting is happening every day. Audiences are preferring to watch their content on streaming. I think you know all this, but really there's this big shift. And how are we spending our time? And at Tegna, we realized that. So in the previous conversation about what's happening in broadcast and what's happening in linear, we were really focused on first bringing a product to market that would service our broadcast clients to make sure that as eyeballs shifted, we had a solution for them that was very concentrated on the same type of content and on connected televisions. So audiences are increasingly watching. They're increasingly watching advertising. Surprise, surprise. I think that's why all of you are here. There are only so many subscriptions. I have another slide that I didn't have time to show today on subscription fatigue. I just saw my Netflix went up to $12.99. Am I going to cut it? No. But subscriptions do add up over time. So we've really been focused on how we take and work with our broadcast clients and how we're thinking about putting together the traditional linear buys and our OTT or our CTV extension. And so there are lots of studies out there about how putting linear and OTT together, has brand favorability impacts. Brands are seen as innovative. They have a unique story to tell, and they're more effective on purchase intent. So this all started off with, hey, let's focus on getting reach. Let's make sure that we're reaching, our audiences. I wish there was another slide up here which I could show you, which is the work that we're doing on unduplicated reach, right? So advertisers that work with us are working with us on, if you're buying linear, what audience are you reaching? And if you're buying OTT, what audience are you reaching and what overlap is there? And we're doing that these days. So one big thing is, the benefit of this is obviously 93% of audiences are watching TVs together. There are multiple people in the room. We're not charging for that, but there's a benefit to CTV. We know that people are making choices about the content that they're watching. Streaming TV is a choice. Every night when I sit down with my family, I do watch cable. There are some shows that I like there, but I'm usually switching on to streaming services, selecting the show that I know I want to watch. I lean into that show. I drive my family crazy because I do watch the commercials and I take all the commercial tiers, but it's important. So just a little bit about us. You may know a little bit about us. We've kind of built this whole concept on, there's a certain quality of content that our linear buyers have been used to buying, and as at Tegna, we have NBC, CBS, NBC, Fox affiliates across the country. We wanted to bring them the same quality of content so they could bundle these products. Our national agencies that we work with are doing that in terms of putting together their reach in each market and shoring it up with their CTV buy in order to make sure that they're getting their reach. So we've built all these direct partnerships. They're all focused on quality. They're all trusted networks. We have built our own marketplace. So, and that's important. I think, we have been continuing to push that envelope in terms of how we work with our broadcast, our networks, and getting direct integrations. When I mean direct integrations, I mean our own VAST tag going directly into their server from our server as opposed to going through different servers. And one of the reasons for that ultimately is to cut down the costs and remove costs from the whole cycle. So quality, partnerships, reach, incredibly important, and certainly delivering with integrity, transparency, actionable results. Ultimately, we sort of feel like trust and transparency is table stakes. You need that. We can talk about that a lot, but really at the end of the day, we've been talking about that for a long time, so that wouldn't be any new news, but it's certainly important. So we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great networks. We're CTV-centric. A lot of things. Everybody approach directly sourced from different angles. Our directly sourced, our direct integrations, and working on upfront deals with all of our content providers so that when you come to us, we've already have the inventory. We have it locked up for a long period of time. We don't take your IO and turn around and go buy your inventory. That allows you to do media planning. It allows us to do media planning. And it also allows us to get priority placement in the pods. And that's, I think, really important for you in terms of engaging audiences. So we're different. We are an advertiser-first platform. We have an open network of a lot of different, networks, I would say. We're not a single platform. We're not a walled garden. We don't work with open exchange inventory, and we're not limited on geographic footprint. So even though a lot of companies think, oh, you're Tegna, you're now in, we just bought more stations. As you know, the consolidations are going on. But, now you're in, 50 markets, and, we're just going to buy in those markets. We've served in all 210 DMAs. So there's the whole idea of reach. There's the whole idea of trust and transparency. But really where we're shifting is to a business of outcomes, right? And so that's important to you. Whether it's attribution, whether it's reaching the right audiences, we're very focused on that. I did a presentation to a room in Texas not too long ago. There was about the same amount of people. It felt like I was at a wedding. This side over here had never bought OTT. This side over here did. I was getting them up to speed while getting them happy on attribution. And where we do is we're kind of meeting our clients where they are. There are a lot of clients that still have a lot of questions. I said to my team here when I first walked in, maybe I don't show yet another presentation. Maybe I just take 10 minutes of questions, and maybe I'll do that next time. But just to kind of focus on what we're doing, we built our own CTV device graph. We've invested in a couple of companies. As you know, MadHive is one of those companies. 4Info, another company. 4Info's mobile device graph, MadHive CT device graph are, sort of allow us to sort of take IPs and focus on attribution, focus on audiences. We have built out, our own proprietary tag so that, one, we can hit these audiences that we know they're looking for, but really we're moving beyond that to, have I hit a consumer? Did the consumer have a business outcome? Whether it is, have they gone to a site? Is there a footfall attribution? Or what is there? So we're really focused on advancing those capabilities. We even have launched and built an audience assurance program. So one thing is, many of you ask us to use third-party tags so that you can make sure that we're delivering impressions. We have another program called Audience Assurance. We are going to give back to you a report that double checks and makes sure that the audiences that you were trying to reach are audiences that we indeed did reach, and in what quantity, what volume, and then obviously there's sort of statistics that will give you. And that's my 10-minute pitch. So I appreciate it. Again, Premion is 3 years old. It's amazing how much has happened in 3 years. This business has grown so much, and there's so many entrants and so many players, and we'd be happy to take any questions, so thank you.
All right, we're going to be taking a 20-minute networking break, so now it's time to talk and do your thing, and we'll get the